had a rotational kingship. Okay, that's the kingdom of Bar, like the Islamic State of Congo under Fodesila, with the capital at Gunjur. You had Fode Kaba, who was like the overlord in the Kiang and the Jara areas. Okay, you had Maba Jaho, Ba and later Set Mati, who were the overlords in present day. Badibu, going to Sanjal and up to the Salums. And of course, you had, like Kemington Kamara, who was the ruler of Nyani, with Ngari Sabali and others. So you had independent African kingdoms and states, but at the same time, you had this outpost of European presence.
Yeah, before even we narrow it down to Gambia, if you look at the work of prominent scholars in this continent, the Afrocentric view is civilization actually began in Africa, dating back to the pyramid, Egypt, coming down to the Ghana, Songhai, and even Mali Empire. These were institutions and states well built, well structured. At that time, what was the contact with Europeans or the West with Africa?
Yes, like even the paleontologists, have traced, the oldest, fossils, in Kenya, like in the Lake Turkana area. So Africa is definitely the cradle of humankind. Now also you have other evidence apart from the fossils, which only paleontologists and archaeologists can, and anthropologists, can make use of. Like you said, the pyramids are also the pyramids in Egypt, but also the pyramids in Hassoum, as in present-day Ethiopia, and of course the pyramids in Sudan. Okay, those were also evidence of the early civilization of the African people. Now coming, closer, the stone circles, for example. In Wasu, in Kerbet, and like along the River Gambia bank, like on the north bank of the River Gambia. All those also explain that there was a high degree of civilization in this part of the world, long before European contact in the 15th century. Yes.
This is where, prominent writer like Chinua Achebe said in his Things Fall Apart, things really fell apart. Where was the knife coming from? Who held the knife that, cut the head from the body?
Well, basically, Europeans, this had to do with the European contact. And like I said, from 1456, the first Europeans had arrived in West Africa. From Cape Verde, coming to the Senegambia coast, to the Gulf of Guinea, the Bight of Biafra, going down up to the Cape of Good Hope. So really, the people who brought the knife to cut what fell apart, were the Europeans, and their arrival really had three basic reasons. One, spread Christianity. Two, look for trading routes. And three, look for gold. Because there was this proverbial belief that in some parts of Africa, gold was so abundant that you didn't even need to mine it. You just had to pick it up from the ground. You see? Yes.
And at this time also there were trading routes, there were markets, as you mentioned. There were also system in government where the African kings and chiefs will collect taxes for the passage of goods and services. Now, how did the transmission or transition happen from African control market and system to eventually the European?
The Atlantic. Yeah, first of all, you are right. You had the trans-Saharan trade routes, which link North Africa to this part of the world. From North Africa, they bring goods like paper. It was a very important commodity because our societies were becoming literate in Arabic. So they needed paper to write copies of the Quran, to write letters and so on. Okay? I mean, from this part of the world, going to the north, they needed things like salt. I mean, things like cola nuts. So that was a trans-Saharan trade, which even started before the arrival of the Europeans. But even like there was also an internal, there were internal trade routes. Okay, I mean, linking. I mean, all the way like from the Casio River in present-day Guinea-Bissau to the Casamas River, to the River Gambia, River Salum, River Senegal. All these rivers, were linked. Okay, I mean through the tributaries and the streams, and these were also like internal trade routes. So there was a brisk and very, very prosperous and lucrative internal trade. Okay, like I mean each region, had a speciality which they traded, with the other regions. So, and this is important because I mean this trade, this internal trade, also explain the prosperity of the empires I've just named, like the Salum Empire. I mean like Cabo. I mean, like the Ceesay and Sin, okay, and so on. All of them, grew prosperous out of this internal trade through the collection of, taxes from traders, okay, and also through the participation in the trade itself. And remember also, this was before the advent of the transatlantic slave trade, which we have not yet mentioned. Yes.
Yeah, because if you also look at this sort of business that marked the evolution of nationhood or statenesshood actually in this continent, was very powerful, and it brought about skills, it brought about specialization, it also brought about a lot of trading, connection among the people.
Yeah.
Now, why wouldn't Africa, build on their strength, knowing that the system is evolving naturally? So all they needed to do maybe is just to focus, like you said, every region was bestowed with a gift. That is, others are predominantly skilled workers, others are predominantly producers, and then others are like the marketing industry. So could you explain why these markets didn't just continue and then it becomes a link with
well, there was a disruption.
Yeah.
There was a disruption occasioned by the arrival of the Europeans. Because when the Europeans arrived, they disrupted this internal trade, this brisk and lucrative internal trade. They also disrupted the transatlantic slave trade and created a new Atlantic trade. And that Atlantic trade from the 15th century was based on one commodity, human beings. That's Africans. Called it transatlantic slave trade. The idea was to harvest the Africans, strong African men and women, transport them across the Atlantic to the Caribbean, to South America, and to the American continent, so as to work in the plantations, to produce cotton, sugar, tobacco, to provide the raw material for the incipient industrial revolution. Because in your world history, that really by the first decade of the 16th century, the industrial revolution was in full gear. Manufacturing had started like in large in large scale, and really what was needed now was the raw material. And how were they to get the raw material? Basically from the plantation economy. And who was to be the backbone of this plantation economy? The African slaves. So that's why the Atlantic trade came and disrupted the internal trade, within the region itself, and also the trans-Saharan trade, which links, this part of Africa, with North Africa and the Arab world.
Yeah, there is a ongoing debate actually on the causes of the slave trade, transatlantic slave trade until now. But I would like to ask, where was humanity in Africa at that time? to an extent that, you know, one brother will take his fellow brother for
I think that's a very, very interesting question. Slavery, as a matter of fact, was not new to Africa. It was part and parcel of our tradition and cultural setup.
In the same form?
Well, no. I mean, our societies were stratified according to division of labor. You had the nobles, who were the ruling class. You had the warriors, who were the fighting class. You have the artisans, like the cobblers, the blacksmiths, the weavers, okay, the woodcutters, the smiths, who are the artisans, and the producers. And then you had the slave caste. These people provided labor to the nobles. But it was not a wicked system. It was not an inhuman system, in the sense that, I mean, if you are like a slave in the king's court, you work some days of the week for the king and some days of the week for yourself. You were allowed to keep a family, to have children, and you were also, sometimes you even had the possibility of getting your freedom if your master died, or if your master so wished. Okay, that was the kind of slavery we knew. Now the Atlantic slave trade changed all that. Now for the first time, human beings were being bought and sold and bought
like commodities.
As commodity. So there was this, commodification of the human being, which was quite new. Okay. Number two, there was an element of torture and wickedness, both from the time the slaves were captured to the time they were taken to the forts like James Island or like Gore, to the time they were put onto the boat to spend 6 weeks before they reach the nearest port in the US, in South Carolina or in North Carolina or in Jamaica or in St. Kitts. And when they arrived, they were dehumanized. They were sold just like a lumo. It's like you buy cattle in the lumo, to the highest bidder. Then they were taken to the plantations and worked to death. You work until you die. All what the master wanted was really to tease out the last drop of labor from the slave. This was what differentiated the African traditional form of slavery from the transatlantic slave trade, which was largely based on exploitation of labor. And not only that, it was also associated with torture and dehumanization. You see, and scholars are still debating. Yeah. I'm going to the point you are asking. What was the role of the Africans in the transatlantic slave trade? Well, at first, we want to believe that they had no idea what the people they were selling, where they would end up. Because the kind of slavery they were used to, like I said, was benign, genial, traditional. Okay, but what happened was the proliferation of firearms. When the slave traders come, the first commodity they brought along was firearms and gunpowder. So people were encouraged to have firearms, to raid your neighbor, raid a fellow state, capture as many people as possible, and come and sell them to the Europeans, who will put them into the ship. So proliferation of firearms was a very, very early method of ensuring a steady supply of slaves for the Atlantic market, for the transatlantic market. That was obvious.
A typical divide and rule system.
Well, yeah. They made sure they cultivated this atmosphere and this context of violence, so that anybody who could procure a firearm can wait until dawn, attack your neighbor, tie them up, march them to James Island, sell them, okay, for more gunpowder, or for another gun, or like for a bottle of whiskey, or like a kilo of tobacco, and then you go back, and rate and rate and rate and rate. So that is why one, lingering impact of the, transatlantic slave trade on Africa is this culture of violence. I mean, it generated, because everybody became interested in capturing people, and to do that, you had to use violence or force. Yes.
Okay, and then this is eventually led to the partitioning of Africa, because now that the European have succeeded in getting involved, but just before going to the partitioning, having known that Africa existed as its own statehood, for example, what sort of defense mechanism had it got at the time to at least ensure its sovereignty?
Well, one, the African states from Ghana, Songhai, Mali, Cabo, like the Kingdom of the Ashanti, I mean,
we continue with the journey to independence. Gambia at 55th anniversary. So already we know that in Africa the whole system was there. We had a system, there was army, there were leadership, and actually the institutions were in place. All of a sudden the West came and let things fall apart. We are asking now with our historian, Hassoum Ceesay, how did the West get involved to an extent of taking over the system that Africa had in place?
Well, the transatlantic slave trade, which lasted for close to 300 years, because really from the 1500s up to the mid 1800s, the slave trade was flourishing. Like the slave trade was not banned in the United States of America until the 1860s. So you can see, in fact, the last recorded slave ship, the Clotilde, arrived from Dahomey to the source of the United States in 1861.
Okay, before we
carrying slaves.
Before we push in that pace.
Yeah, I'm coming to answer the question.
Okay.
Yeah, what the slave trade did after 300 years was to weaken the fabric of the African society. Like I said before, it generated an atmosphere of violence. It created a context of instability. It also, destroyed, trust within and among, neighbors, neighboring states, neighboring empires, or neighboring kingdoms. So that was the first, source of weakness for the decline of the African empires, to make it very, very, easy, okay, for the Europeans to come in and just give the dead blow, if you like.
To help digest this point, is we would like to ask, nationhood exists with its own apparatus in terms of defense, in terms of economy, and the people. All this should be there. So what was the type of defense mechanism in place for Africans to ensure territorial integrity?
Standing armies, number one. All the states have standing armies. Like even, if you look at the Mandinka state, you had like a whole warrior class, the Nyancho. Yeah, these were charged with defending, the state. You see, like the Gelewar, in the Wall of States, they had the Gelewar. This, like cavalry, a horse, riding warriors, brave. They drink heavily, okay, but we are good at fighting and defending the territorial integrity of the states. So, all the pre-colonial states and empires, be it Bawol, Kayor, Walo, Sin, Kabu, Kombo, had strong armies. Yeah, like for the Silla in Kombo. He fought against the British several times. Well, of course, the last battle was the Battle of 1893, in which Gunjur was destroyed, and Fodesila was captured and exiled to St. Louis, in present-day Senegal. But on 2 occasions, he successfully, resisted.
And he survived.
Yes, like British, because British wanted to annex Kombo. He said, no, this is my state. British told him, we'll sign a treaty with you. He said, I'm not going to sign a treaty. I'm not going to sign away. I'm in my state. Then they attacked. They came into Kamara. He defeated the British, at his capital, at Nungusin. It's in present-day, Senegal, near Koungheul. But that was the whole area of Nyani, present-day part of Gambia and part of Senegal. So these pre-independent, pre-colonial states had strong standing armies. They had a brave warrior class. And number 2, they also had good economies. They knew how to collect tax, sometimes from European traders. Like the King of Bara, for example, was well known. The Kingdom of Bara was well known for its ability to generate tax from European traders on James Island, in Jufure, in Albreda, and in the Seeded Mine. Okay, so before any ship, pass, his
waters
from the Atlantic into the Gambia River, the King of Bara had to collect a tax. You see, so really, these pre-colonial states had all the variables for a strong polity, a good economy, and a brave army.
As if slave trade was not enough in 1884 to go into 85, then the Berlin Conference came in, where European powers came and met up to decide as to their shares in Africa. Yeah. That is the partition in Africa. So, was it what motivated them to do this?
Well, yeah, the Berlin Conference, came barely 40 years after the end of the slave trade. Okay, so like I said, what the Transatlantic slave trade did was to help to weaken the African empires. And when the slave trade ended, now the Europeans said, okay, we have ended the trade in human beings because of the abolitionist pressures and so on. Now we are going back to Africa to do what is called legitimate trade in palm oil, in ivory, in gold, like in timber, okay, and like in groundnuts, in cocoa and so on. We are no longer going to trade in human beings, but we are going to continue trading in Africa, exploiting, now the natural resources of Africa. But to do that, they really had to have, political control, which they did not have. Because up to this time, like I said, you had the empires, yes. Like the Kingdom of Bara and so on. So now, for them to have, access to these resources, they had, 2 options. One, to sign treaties, with the African kings to allow them to trade and so on. That's what they did until they bought, Batos, that's Banjul in 1816, to be like a hub for British traders who wanted to venture into the River Gambia to buy and sell. Okay, in 1823, they occupied Makati, that's Georgetown. That also to be like another hub for British traders, who wanted to venture deeper into the interior.
So they bought Banjul in 1816?
Yeah, and in 1823, they bought Makati from the king of Nyani, Ngari Sabali. Then of course in 1816 from the king of Kombo, under whose territory St. Mary's Island, was located.
What does it mean when they?
So I just want to finish this. So really, I mean, some they sign treaties with, but others refuse. Other African, kings and states refuse to sign treaties. When you refuse to sign treaty, now they started, military imperialism. That is, the British or the French will now use their armies to attack these African states and force them to submit. So by 1884, 1885, this imperialistic, phase of domination, of European domination, it had begun. But there was a danger that among themselves, they can fight among themselves for control over certain sections of the continent. This was why they called the Berlin Conference in 1884. So that they will put a map of Africa on the table and they will apportion each European power a certain area. And all the others will know that this area belongs to the French. The Germans should not go there. This area belongs to the British. The Portuguese will not go there, and so on. So that was the essence of the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885.
That is a good point to explain the evolution of the EU. They had solidarity among themselves for a common agenda.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Because they said, let us not fight over Africa. We can share out Africa amongst ourselves. And to do that, we just have to bring a map. For example, British, you are already in River Gambia area. Yes, okay, take it. French, you are already in Gore. Yes, okay, take it. The Portuguese, you are already in Casio. Present-day Guinea-Bissau, take it. Okay, the Germans, you are already in Namibia. Yes, take it. That was the essence of the Berlin Conference.
And the resistance from Africa was not enough.
After after 1885, the Europeans agreed. Now we must get Africa. If they want to sign treaties, if the African kings want to sign treaties, it's fine. They will sign treaties, give away their lands, and then we can treat them nicely and even give them a stipend. If they refuse to sign treaties, we will use our superior military power, attack them, conquer them, and seize their territory.
Before you continue in that line, just let me take you back a bit on the signing of treaties and then the agreement for them to buy states and towns in Africa, like the battles was sold to them. What did they do with these areas they possessed at that time?
No, this way, hubs for trade. Yeah, because remember, the French traders were in competition with the British all along the River Gambia. Yeah. So they bought Georgetown and Batos das Banjul just to provide British trading companies like safe havens. Okay? So that if you are a French trader, you cannot trade within the proximity of Makati Island because it's British territory.
At the expense of our
That's why they had a garrison, and not only that, they even established military garrisons. Yeah, so that anytime a local chief or the French wanted to come and interfere in the British trade, the soldiers will go after them. They also had a garrison in Batos, like in present-day Banjul, so that you had the commercial aspect, but also you had a standing military of British, army and navy, ready to defend, British mercantile interests in British areas. Yeah, and of course they had an administrative setup. There was an administrator on Makati Island. There was an administrator on St. Mary's Island also, who later became promoted to the role of governor. Yes.
Yeah, that was a naked takeover. In such a very negative manner, where does it take our African kings, knowing that they,
very good question.
One time they were in charge and they had the system that they got.
Some were killed. Some were killed in battle. Yeah, some were killed.
Killed.
Yeah, they refused to submit to the French, to the British, or to the Germans. and they fought and they were killed. Okay, like the German massacre in present-day Namibia. Of 1904 or 1905. Or like the Maji Maji rebellion in present-day Tanzania. Or like, for the Sila, I told you, was captured. He was not killed, but he was exiled. For the Kaba was killed by a combined British and French army, patrol in Kiang in 1901. Because he refused to sign. He said, I will fight.
That's connected with the Sankandi incident, right?
Yes. Okay. Musamoro, he was not killed, but he captured and taken to exile to Sierra Leone until he became sick, and he was allowed to return in 1924, and he died in 1921. Lajor, was killed. Okay. So, after 1884, the Europeans had zero tolerance for African, political leaders.
Would it be because
you either sign a treaty, and they demote you and call you chief, and give you a stipend, or you fight, okay?
And try your chance.
Like in defense of your land, your territory, they capture you and exile you, or they capture you and kill you. Yeah. So the choice was quite, stark.
Could you project the imagination of the subjects of these kings? One time, they have no other person than to, definitely have followed their own kingdom. Now that they've seen their kings being killed, being demoted.
In exile.
Exile.
Well,
so
that was the second humiliation. I call it the second humiliation of Africa. The first humiliation was the Transatlantic slave trade. When the Europeans will come, buy us, put us onto their ship and take us to work in their plantation with torture and death, following us everywhere. The second humiliation was after 1885, when the Europeans came out in full force with guns blazing to destroy the African political states and to destroy African, leadership and rulership through exile, through death, or through demotion. It was quite a humiliating experience because you had, kingdoms like the Kingdom of Bara, over 500 years old. The Sonkos were ruling. The last Bara king, was Maranta Sonko. He surrendered to the British. He said, "Don't kill me. I cannot fight you." So he signed a treaty, and he was demoted, and he became the first chief of Nyomi. Okay, and overnight, Africans saw 500-year-old empires being destroyed. Kings or rulers whose lineage extended to 200 years, 300 years, now been demoted and been called chiefs, been given orders by the European governors or the commissioners. So it was total humiliation.
And in the case of Gambia, this marked the introduction of indirect rule system to the British Empire.
Yes.
What was the structure like?
Like like I said, after 1885, the Europeans agreed in how to share out Africa, and the work started between the French and the British to draw the border. The British were quite explicit. They told the French, we only want the river.
The river Gambia?
That's all what we want. That's why our country is so small. From the North Bank, from the high water tide, high water mark, okay, 10 miles.
10 miles.
Not 10 miles south.
South.
That's it. That's why there is hardly any place in the Gambia which is more than 20 kilometers from the river bank. Hardly.
What was this obsession for the river?
Well, trade, because like I said, they already had mercantile interest in Georgetown and in Batos. Yeah, they made it clear. No, they made it very clear that our interest is to promote British trade.
Because the river is navigable.
It's navigable. Yes. Okay. So by 1889, what is today called the Gambia, the borders were finalized.
1829.
No, like in August 1889. 89. So you can say that the Gambia, as we know it today, was established in August 1889 as a British colony.
Yeah,
and the French took the rest on this side and on the other side, on the north and on the south.
We will definitely come back to Gambia, but because we are talking about Africa in general, colonialism took over the continent, and all of a sudden Africans realized the need to come back and become their own. So to ask Hassoum again is, when did Africans really start and realize that they need to take over their destiny? When was this?
Well, after 1885, it took the Europeans another 10 years to pacify, as they used to, call it, to pacify Africa, because people are still resisting. Yeah, like in some parts of Casamance, the island Sito Jata, was resisting, until the 1940s. Just to tell you that colonialism, in itself, lasted very short. That's a very short period. Yeah. So that up to the 1900s, some parts of Africa were still resisting British rule or French rule or German rule. Like the Herero in Namibia, up to 1905, they were resisting Germans, that we will not give you our land. Go back to where you come from.
Because they were nosing the old wounds that have been created by the slave trade.
Exactly.
And then eventually
after 1885, it didn't mean that the whole of Africa, was now relaxed. They said, oh no, we accept the Europeans. Okay, let us keep quiet. No, there was resistance, continuous resistance. Like in the Gambia, Fode Kaba was killed in January 1901. That was the last form of resistance against colonial rule, like on Gambian territory. You see, so basically, it took the Europeans from 1885. It took them like another 10, 15 years to really, settle down and be able to say that the whole of Africa, well, of course, except Ethiopia and Liberia, are now under our firm control.
In the Gambia, could you just touch on the Kingdom of Kombo? I recall of the Busumbala, the Sukuta, Sabiji.
Yeah, Brikama, Gunjur, but the capital was at Gunjur.
Gunjur.
But for the Sila ran an Islamic state. So what he did was, the imamate was, based in Gunjur. So each of these major towns you have named, you had a Qadi whom you appointed, and the Qadi, it was like the governor. And he represented for the Sila there. Now, the British were not happy that just next door, to their capital, that's Batos, you had an independent Islamic state, powerful, and doing their own thing. So they tried many times to forge, a treaty with for the Sila, but he refused. He told them, our ways are different. You have your own way, your own desire. I have my own desire and my own way of doing things. So later, when they realized that it was not going to be possible, to have him on board, they attacked him
in a guerrilla war form.
No. They used the Royal Navy. There was like a squadron, which was brought from Sierra Leone. Okay. Another squadron was brought from Gold Coast, and they attacked Gunjur from the sea.
Gold Coast is current-day Ghana?
Ghana, and they bombarded Gunjur until the whole town, was set on fire. And for the Sila, was captured, and his generals, and they were, deported to St. Louis in 1893. But just after 4 months, he died. Yes. And then the whole of Kombo came under British rule. In 1893.
Why wouldn't the British understand the concept of indirect rule system with this Islamic state in Gambia when they accepted it in Nigeria with Usman Danfodio and the like there?
Well, I think what they really wanted was total control. If for the Sila were able to accommodate the British in a way that he would be just like another chief or like another imam, I'm sure he would. They would have allowed that, but Forestilla refused. He wanted, the British to treat him like an independent state.
Yeah.
Sign treaties with him, trade with him, they pay him taxes, and then, which the British were not ready to do, because they realized that, I mean, you cannot have, at the doorstep of Banjul, Las Batos, an independent state, powerful and doing things on its own. Just as they didn't allow the people of Bara.
This explains
as early as 1888, they told the king of Bara that you have to sign a treaty and hand over your state, or I will go to war. And Maranta told them, I cannot go to war. Yeah, and then he signed the treaty. It's called the British Bara Treaty of 1889. Yes.
Well, in this context, both Euro and Afrocentric view should recognize this as a cruelty in the side of the British. Would they take that at the time?
Well, I said this was an age of imperialism. All what mattered to the European powers was economic control and political control. Now, any stumbling block would be crushed, and that's what they did. Like I said, you had what was called gunboat diplomacy. Yeah, the Sankante incident was a good example. Yeah, they had no business there because it was a local dispute in which the local chief, could have solved. Okay, but because they knew, Fodekaba was aligned to one of the chiefs, they said, well, this is a golden opportunity for us to interfere to be able to get hold of Fodekaba, and exactly that happened until he was killed in 1901. Yeah, so this was an era of gunboat diplomacy. You sign the treaty, or they bombard you, and of course, they had superior firepower.
In a typical survival of the fittest format.
Exactly.
And Gambia eventually got the independence, atmosphere rising up.
Right.
So now let's start talking about the personalities who was there to say Gambia needed to be independent, or who was there to oppose it, other than the British who colonized us. This is a very important topic that Gambians need, to know.
Well, you are talking about the era of nationalism. We have to look at it in a continuity. It was a continuum. Because the resistance of Fodekaba and Fodesila was a form of nationalism itself. But they resisted foreign control. Now, after they were defeated and silenced, another form of nationalism emerged. That of Edward Francis Small, for example, who used his newspaper, the Gambia Outlook, to remind people that just a few years ago, you were all independent and free people under the control of your kings in Bara or in Kombo. But now, you have no rights. In fact, you are subjects of the British.
This is his message to the people.
Yeah, through his newspaper, which he created in 1920, the Gambia Outlook.
Quickly, Edward Francis Small, where was he learned?
He went to school here in Batos and then to Freetown. When he came back, he began to publish a newspaper.
Good morning from the capital city here in Banjul, and of course at Makati Square, where of course, as always, Hi Africa, we of course bring you live coverages on events, and today is a special day, and we are here at Makati Square, like I said, as Gambia celebrate its 55th independent anniversary, 55 years of nationhood, time to reflect and time, of course, to look back how far Gambia have gone as a country since it, of course, became independent in 1965. And of course, my name is Amadou Kante, and thank you so very much for joining us wherever you might be watching right now around the globe. It's always a pleasure to be here to bring you new events happening in the Gambia and beyond. And of course, today we are going to make sure that, as always, you will be informed on everything that happens here today. And as you can see, it's especially the security, of course, officers have already arrived. They are here paraded from different apparatus of the security, and this event today would be presided over also by the President of the Republic jointly. Of course, among others to be here would be government officials, invited guests, and host of people of course of Gambians, I should say, that are in the country So of course it's very, very good to be here again. So I am joined on this platform by my colleagues Modu Nyang and of course Abdullah as well. Mon Niang ma nuyu la ñu am mbégte dellu ci plateforme bu am solo fii tey nag mu nekk bés bi nga xamante ne mooy bés bu màgga bés bu am solo Gambia bu moomee boppam tey ñu ko màggal ci réew mi ñu teew fii war a digtal loolu ñi nga xamante ne ñoom ñooy ànd ak ñun jamono ji ñoom yaay la nga nuyoo ñi nga xamante ne ñoom ñoo nekk di seetaan.
am na solo jërëjëf Amadou ginnaaw bi ñu leen nuyu itam suñu naataango Alaaji Ceesay ñu ngi ko nuyu bu baax a baax nuyu ñi nga xam ne jamono ji ñu ngi seetaan Africa TV comme noo ko waxee rek ñu ngi fii si Makati Square nar leen indi nar leen dégtal li nga xam ne dina fi xew tey fii si Makati Square muy bis bu Gambie di màggal boppam bu mu moomee boppam ak léegi ren nag nekk juróom fukki la ak juróom mu nekk lu am solo loolu tax tey ñu teew fii comme li ñu dig gaay rek mooy nañ ñu topp Africa TV lépp lu fi xew rek incha allah dinañ leen ko indil si noonu leen ko buggee parce que ñu ngi fi pour jaamu seen soxla incha allah am nañ mbégte pour teew fii lii mbégte la tey si réew mi kontaan nañ si bu baax a baax Amadou.
jërëjëf Modou su ko defee tamit ñu dalal Alaaji Ceesay comme na ko waaye Abdoulaye ñu ngi lay nuyu ñu bàyyi la nga nuyoo ñi nga xamante ñoom ñoo nekk di seetaan jamono ji.
waaw rafetlu teew fii ne bu baax a baax ba pare cër la bu mag a mag si ñu fi nekk ba pare tamit li ki démb ñëpp réewuñu mbir Africa TV ñu ngi woon fii nii kon def nañ ay interview ba pare tamit wane na rek Africa TV cofeel bu ñu am si dëkk bi depuis démb ñu ngi fi wane nañ li nga xamante ni moom moo fi xew te tamit lépp lu fi tabitee rek dinañ leen ko àggee askan mi mu nekk si biir réew mi mu nekk tamit ñu nekk si bitim réew I'm very delighted to be part of this wonderful and amazing event. juróom fukki at ak juróom dafa mel ni Gambie bu moomee seen bopp ak léegi xew-xew yu bëri xew nañ fi te lépp li nga xamante ne rote na fii nii rek incha allah dinañ ko àggee askan bi nga xamante ne ñu ngi ñoo seetaan jërëjëf.
am na solo jërëjëf Alaaji Ceesay jërëjëf tamit Modou Mohamed Niang comme ni ñu ko waxee mbokk yi tey su ko defee ñu ngi fii ci Makati Square comme ni ñu ko waxee bés bi nag bés bu màggal la bés bu am solo ci réew mi moo waral ay Africa am taxawaay bile su ko defee incha allah lépp li nga xamante ne comme suma gars yi ni ñu ko waxee xew na fii nañ leen ko digtal ci nu mu gën a yaatoo nañ def tamit li nga xamante ne mooy taxaw seetlu def ji jàngat jaar-jaar Gambie ci nu mu moomee boppam Gambia balaa independence Gambia bu mu moomee boppam ak Gambia bu mu toll jamono ji loolu yëpp ci jàngat incha allah dina ñëw ci kanam ci li nga xamante ne mooy ci event bu am solo. Well viewers, as I mentioned earlier on, of course it's a very very special occasion, and on that note you keep watching. We will of course come back in short time to continue the live coverage. This is iAfrica TV and we are live here at the Makati Square. Stay with us, we'll be back shortly.
The parade commander takes off from there. Thank you.